Before we get started, a warning that there will be depictions of death and violence in today's episode. Hello! From Wonder Media Network, I'm Jenny Kaplan, and this is Womanica. For the past 6 years, we've been telling the stories of women you may or may not know about, but definitely should. This month, we're bringing back our favorite Womanica episodes from across the back catalog. These are women across centuries and around the world who made their mark. With that, here's one of our favorite episodes. Hello. From Wonder Media Network, I'm Jenny Kaplan, and this is Womanica. Historically, women have been told to make themselves smaller, to diminish themselves. Some have used that idea to their advantage, disappearing into new identities. For others, a disappearance was the end to their stories, but the beginning of a new chapter of their legacies. This month, we're telling the stories of these women. We're talking about disappearing acts. The year is 1918. A family is asleep and under house arrest. They're awoken during the middle of the night and told to put on their clothes in a hurry. The children rub the sleep out of their eyes and look around at the guards who surround them. The commander tells them not to worry. They will soon be taken to a safe house. Just come downstairs. All will be well. Or so they thought. This was the empty promise that began the elusive legacy of today's Womanican. Let's talk about Anastasia Romanov. Anastasia was born just outside of St. Petersburg, Russia in 1901. She wasn't an ordinary girl born into an ordinary family. Her parents, Nicholas II and Alexandra, were Tsar and Tsarina of Russia. Anastasia was part of the Romanov dynasty, the family that had ruled the country for nearly 300 years. Anastasia had 3 older sisters, Olga, Tatiana, and Maria, with whom she was incredibly close. There are several photos of the 4 girls together, wearing identical white lace dresses and floppy sun hats. Some of them were even taken by Anastasia herself. Friends and family described Anastasia as sharp and clever, with a penchant for getting into trouble. She loved to play pranks on her siblings and enjoyed being the center of attention. Though she had a strong personality, Anastasia's younger brother, Alexei, was often the family's focus. He was frequently housebound due to a bleeding disorder. As the only male heir to the throne, his survival was critical to maintaining the royal line, especially during a time of political upheaval. The children grew up during a contentious period in Russian politics under their father's rule. Russia's roles in the Russo-Japanese War and World War I brought terrible casualties that left the country in a state of disarray. Russians were increasingly unhappy with the leadership, and unrest grew. The infamous Russian mystic Anastasia's mother called in to care for Alexei, Grigory Rasputin, further alienated the Romanovs from the Russian people. There was a growing movement to abolish the Russian monarchy and adopt a communist government instead. The family knew its position was precarious. In February of 1917, the struggle for power in Russia reached a boiling point. Workers began to strike, demanding better working conditions. But when Nicholas sent his army to quell the unrest, members of the military turned against him, unhappy with the defeats they'd been facing on the war front. Local protests morphed into a bigger revolution. They called for the end of the monarchy. Not long after, the revolutionaries took over. Nicholas abdicated the throne and a provisional government was put into place. Soon, the Bolsheviks, a communist group, had taken full control. After being forced to abdicate, Nicholas took his family and fled the scene. They were eventually exiled to the Ural Mountains and placed under house arrest. They lived there in relative quiet until they were awoken one fateful day in July of 1918. Under the pretext of providing the family with better security, the Bolshevik leader told them to go down to the cellar. The family and staff went downstairs. When they reached the cellar, gunmen were brought in and began to shoot at them. One soldier recalled the execution as a shower of hail. Soldiers began firing with abandon, many missing their intended targets. Fumes and gun smoke filled the space, making it hard to see. Bullets ricocheted off jewels embedded in the Romanovs' clothing, hitting the walls. The violence went on for 20 minutes. At last, the room seemed quiet. All that remained was the heavy breathing of the soldiers, the bodies burned and buried in a clearing near a cluster of birch trees. This is the end of Anastasia's short life story, but her ghost lived on much longer. Just a few years after the Romanovs were killed, a woman named Anna Anderson popped up in Berlin claiming to be the supposedly dead Duchess Anastasia. She said she'd survived the shooting and escaped her assailants. Her account was convincing. Sure, she looked like Anastasia, but people were desperate for a glimmer of hope, or maybe mystery, for someone to have survived the violent massacre. Within months of her announcement, Russians began visiting the so-called Anastasia to pay their respects. But it was all a lie. Anna died in 1984, and posthumous genetic testing proved that she was not actually the fallen Duchess. Further confusion around the DNA evidence at the gravesite also gave people reason to pause and wonder what actually happened. Though 11 people were executed, only 9 sets of remains were initially found. DNA evidence of Prince Alexei and one of his sisters appeared to be missing. This mystery was also put to bed in 2007 when a group of archaeologists discovered a second gravesite. This one contained the remains of 2 more people who have since been identified as the missing members of the family. Despite evidence pointing to the death of the whole Romanov family, some refused to accept that Anastasia was among those who lost their lives. In fact, nearly 100 different people have claimed to be the long-lost Anastasia since the execution. Countless films, books, and shows have been generated from the romanticized story of her disappearance. Whether Anastasia truly disappeared or not, the lore around her life and family lives on. The continued fascination with her life seems, in many ways, to be a manifestation of people's desires for hope, in spite of insurmountable odds. Thank you for listening to this best of episode of Womanica. For more information, find us on Facebook and Instagram at Womanica Podcast. Special thanks to Liz Kaplan, my favorite sister and co-creator. As always, we'll be taking a break for the weekend. Join us on Monday for another one of our favorite episodes.